Coming up on Digital Music Trends 148 on the 3rd of September 2013, we talk about Spotify Connect, Twitter and commerce, videos on Facebook, VMA sales impact, Vevo and GEMA, Yahoo Music redesign, libraries, and much more. This week's show is sponsored by media law firm Sheridans at sheridans.co.uk. We thank them for their support of Digital Music Trends. Welcome to Digital Music Trends. I'm Andrea Leonelli, and this is the weekly show where we talk about and try to make sense of the latest news in the digital music industry. And DMT is available as both audio and video on a variety of channels, including iTunes, most podcatchers, YouTube, SoundCloud, Mixcloud, Spreaker, Stitcher, and TuneIn Radio. That's quite a mouthful. To get in touch with the show, you can tweet us at DigiMusicTrends or email us on contact@digitalmusictrends.com. And joining us today, two great guests. First of all, Kevin Bruner from CD Baby, where he looks after the DIY Musician website on DIYmusician.cdbaby.com, and the CD Baby DIY podcast on cdbabypodcast.com. So hi, Kevin, and great to have you on the show. How's it going?
Thanks. It's going good. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you on. And last but not least, we have Mike McCready, the CEO of Music X-Ray, which is a platform that connects artists and songwriters with music industry professionals. And I'm sure many of DMT's listeners will be aware of Music X-Ray already. So hi, Mike. How's it going?
Going great. I guess I'm the only one without my own podcast here, right?
I know. Unfortunately, I had Brian Thompson scheduled for the show, but he'll join us in a couple of weeks' time. He was stuck on a ferry in Vancouver Island, which is not one of the worst places to be stuck on. I've been there, and it's pretty a lovely part of the world. And of course, Kevin, you are in Portland, and Mike is in New York. So we're a stateside show today. I'm in London, so I'm having a beer because it's past beer o'clock. It's quite exciting. First time I get to do the show this late, so it's great.
I don't know, we might have to not let you talk so much.
Yeah, it's terrible, isn't it? I've already had a bit, so no, it's fine. It's fine. I can hold my liquor. Mike, actually, we're going to see each other in a couple of weeks at the Future Music Forum in Barcelona, and you're kind of quite involved with that. So how did that relationship come about with the Barcelona team?
Oh, it's funny. So I've lived in Barcelona much of my life. And I started working in the music business there, and then sort of merged into the international music business, where I was only going to Barcelona to go home. But I worked for many years in the Barcelona music business, and about 4 years ago, someone mentioned to me that this Future Music Forum existed, that it was a new conference around the music industry that was being organized in Barcelona, and I felt really left out. I felt like, well, this thing's going on in Barcelona. I don't know anything about it. And I looked at the speaker roster, and I saw that a bunch of my international friends were going to be in town, and they all know that I live in Barcelona. And I thought, oh, they're going to be here, and I don't even know this thing exists. So I contacted the organizer, a guy named Niall Dorley, who's a seasoned event organizer and had gotten interested in the music space. And I said, hey, this is what I do. This is who I am. I'm here. I'd love to participate. And he made me a substitute panelist. And I was, from not knowing him or anything, I thought, okay, that's great. I'm happy to participate in any capacity.
Awesome.
But the day of the event coincided with a general strike of everybody in Spain, including airline traffic controllers, and whoever was hosting the event, I can't remember who it was now, wasn't able to arrive. So I got moved from substitute panelist to host of the event, and I've kept that role for the last 4 years, and I'm working very closely with now how the event is organized and the panels that we feature and the guests that we invite.
That's great. And the DMT is going to be covering Future Music Forum in a couple of weeks' time, so keep an eye out on the site for that coverage. I'm sure I'll try and post as much as possible as to what's happening over there. And Kevin, I just wanted to ask you, what are you up to, CD Baby, first of all, and what's your general sort of purview there?
I'm the director of marketing here, so it's always busy. But we've been launching a couple new products and kind of rebranding one of them. We launched CD Baby Pro recently, which is helping artists collect publishing royalties, which is kind of a whole new venture, something we haven't kind of stepped out in before, and so that's kind of been taking up a lot of my time. And then we're also kind of rebranding our sync program. We've been offering a sync program for a while, but there's a lot of excitement about YouTube and collecting royalties on or for ad revenue off of YouTube. So we've been doing that for a while, but we're just kind of rebranding a little bit to help people understand that program a little bit better. So that's been keeping us busy, and just the typical ups and downs of the music business.
Of course. And I have to say, actually, I have used CD Baby's service recently because I decided to put out an old EP of a metal band I was in a few years ago, and which I won't mention because I don't want people to go listen to it, but it's quite embarrassing. But I just wanted to say that it was a flawless service. Literally, I think within 4 days. The tracks were up on Spotify, and I've heard people say it takes much longer usually. So, it was pretty awesome. And cool. So let's move on to talk about the news, and we start with Spotify today. So Spotify, it's a recent news actually. Today unveiled a new feature called Spotify Connect. So this new feature allows users on a mobile device, and at the moment it's only iOS apps, but Android's coming soon, to stream music, to move the stream of their music from their phone to compatible connected speakers. So essentially the handling of the stream itself will move from the device to the speaker, and the device becomes merely a remote control for controlling the music, which is great because it means that you don't get interruptions when your phone rings or you get a notification, and also your battery life is preserved, so your phone doesn't run out of batteries super quick. And so this is a hardware integration that requires, of course, firmware updates from the speaker makers, and they've already got quite a bunch of companies involved, including Bang & Olufsen, Pioneer, Yamaha, Philips, and also a few that I never heard of, like Teofil, Hama, Marantz, Danone, and Argon. And so there's going to be loads more brands presumably coming on board in the next few months, and some of the speakers are going to be unveiled this week in Berlin at the IFA Consumer Tech Fair. So that's quite cool. And some of the speakers that are already out there are going to be retrofitted with a firmware update, because it's purely a software play, provided that the speaker has the right chips inside it. So it seems like a great move for Spotify. Can you guys see yourselves using this feature to migrate from an on-the-go listening experience to an indoor one via home speaker system? Mike, what's your take on this?
Oh, absolutely. I think that the more these companies are doing to make the process or the streamlined access to music easier and easier, more and more seamless, is just going to increase the engagement people have with music, and that's we're seeing that streaming, I think, is already kind of winning this battle. I realize that it's still in its infancy, but just the momentum that it has, and the way that it seems to be cutting down on piracy in countries where the adoption and the penetration is even deeper.
Yeah.
The more they can do in this direction, I think just the better for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kevin, do you have any wireless speaker system at home at the moment, and would you like to see something like this take hold?
I don't. I will say technically I don't, but I'm a big Apple TV user.
Me too.
So I mean, if I probably wouldn't buy something like this, I know people would like it. What I'm waiting for is for Apple TV to have a Spotify app on Apple TV, which they're not going to have, because they're going to have iTunes Radio very shortly, which may dictate some of my listening habits. But yeah, I think the way they're going to win this battle is through the consumers. I mean, I know, regardless of what artists think, if somebody provides a service that consumers want and can find a market, that's how it's gonna fly. It's that's how they did it with the iPod, and I think if Pandora seems to be making good inroads with things like this, with components that are built to work with the service, so I don't see it going poorly for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's an interesting thing, actually, because it looks actually that they're going to move away from proprietary device support, which has been sort of at the core of the strategy until now, thanks to this new implementation. And that kind of affects quite heavily Sonos as well, because they were one of the premier partners of Spotify from the very beginning on the hardware front, and I think made some inroads in helping them get into some of the high-end users and homes. So that's an interesting thing as well for Spotify. I guess the only thing is consumer awareness. I mean, are you concerned that consumers are going to find it hard to figure out that this feature exists. I mean, they're talking about maybe putting some notices on the boxes that this is actually happening. But for speakers that are already out there, they don't have any displays to show that this feature has been added through a firmware update. So I'm just kind of curious as to how many people are actually going to be realizing that this is happening and that they can actually use their current speakers for this.
Yeah. It's kind of a long game. I have a Bang & Olufsen system. It's one of those, can't remember the model, B&O 1200 or something. It has the 6 CD changers,
right.
that with
the flat one that hung on the wall?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have it on a pedestal. And I have the same CDs in that thing that I had like 5 or 6 years ago. I don't change out the CDs anymore. I come home and I plug in my iPod and I stream Spotify, through the auxiliary into it. The fact that this is becoming just an anticipated and easier process, I agree. I think it's a long game that's going to take manufacturers and people coming into the idea that this is possible and it's seamless and it's easy. But over time that will happen, and you have to be there. You have to be doing that with your product if you want to be on the leading edge curve of that.
Yeah, what I want is a dongle, actually. I want a little dongle that you can plug into an existing system, and that would be great.
Yeah, they want you to buy the whole new system.
I know, that's what I think.
They'll probably get me too.
they don't want to sell you a $20 dongle. They want you to buy the speakers.
Well, I guess Spotify doesn't have any commercial interest in this. I guess they're just licensing the technology because it's good for them to have it out there. So it's not unfeasible that a smaller company would try and create something like that. I would quite like it. That'd be nice. And talking about Spotify still, there was an interesting article this week from Glenn Peoples at Billboard. It was an interesting piece that was sort of looking at a hypothetical on whether a musician's strike on Spotify would be possible. So, of course, Glenn is not encouraging the strike or anything like that. He's merely considering if it was feasible, given all the sort of grumblings that we've heard over the last few months with Nigel Godric's and Atoms for Peace being the most high-profile one recently. And so, he looks at all the reasons why it would be very difficult to organize, and ultimately, there's no easy mechanism for musicians to be able to withdraw their music off Spotify or any streaming service, really, for the matter. They would have to set up a new type of way to organize themselves so that they could pull it out at the same time, but spanning tens of different digital distribution platforms, and so it sounds like it would be a complete nightmare to arrange. And of course, this is merely a thought piece on what would happen if artists who were grumbling were to do something about it. But Brian, starting with you, because you're a CD baby, what is the reaction of artists to Spotify payments so far? I know that we're now like over a year and a half in to Spotify being present in the North American market, so I'm sure artists are paying attention to that. Do you hear grumblings your end as well, or are artists that are using the CD Baby platform pretty understanding and happy with the rates that they're getting?
Artists always want to be paid more. I mean, there's no denying that. Well, I think the idea of if artists went on strike from Spotify is interesting. The hard thing is with artists that CD Baby represents, they're all if serious change is going to happen, it needs to happen from the top with like the major draws to the service going on strike against the service, which they can't, because if they've got a record deal, they don't control those rights.
Exactly, yeah.
So I think, what Atoms for Peace and some of the folks that have been outspoken about it recently, I think they bring up some good points, but it's going to take a whole lot of major label artists for the independent, the truly independent artist that's out there, even if they're making a living from their music. The way I look at it is you need your music everywhere where music fans are. I mean, because your biggest issue is building a fan base. When you have a catalog that you're managing that has value, to me, then it's a different scenario of what might be your best course of action.
Yeah.
Some of the people that have said they're going to jump ship on Spotify, I don't think it really will hurt them too much. they might not gain some of the newer listeners who, where they're used to using a service like Spotify all the time. But, there's lots of discussion about streaming payments, and Pandora is another hot button issue when it comes to that. But, I think if artists start seeing some positive traction there, they'd be a little bit happier. But at the same time, I think what confuses the whole issue is a lot of people try to compare streaming, especially when it comes to Pandora. They try to compare that to Spotify and then compare that to traditional radio plays and what you might get paid. So, but it's an interesting idea if artists went on strike to see what happened. I mean, if there's no music, they don't have a service. So
yeah,
is that even feasible for companies like CD Baby or TuneCore to? Okay, we're taking it down for these few days. Okay, now we're putting it back up. I mean, isn't that a logistical nightmare?
We wouldn't want to do it. It can be done. It happened to TuneCore with Amazon in the UK.
Yeah,
and it can be done. They just sort of flip a switch and everything from that catalog gets pulled.
Yeah,
it's not something we would advocate, because we're here to service the artist. And like I said, it's different scenarios. And I always tell artists, you're better off having your music where the fans are. If you have rabid fans that want your music, then there's ways to generate revenue. But if you don't have fans or people can't find your music, that's an issue.
Yeah, sure. Of course, we're talking hypotheticals. I don't think anybody thinks that this is feasible, but it's just interesting to think that at least in the UK, artists would have more of a choice as to whether they can withdraw the music from an on-demand streaming service than from an internet radio streaming service, because that's handled through the blanket license via the PRS. And at least in the UK, you can't withdraw specific rights from the society. It's an all or nothing situation. So they could withdraw rights from an on-demand streaming service if they own their own rights, but they can't withdraw the rights from internet radio if they have signed up to PRS. So it's an interesting situation, hypothetical situation. But and finally, there was an interesting post by Mark Mulligan also talking about streaming, and so he looked at some of the reports that we've had in the last few weeks, talking about the increase in recorded music in the Netherlands, in Sweden, in Norway, and in Germany in the first half of 2013. Of course, the Netherlands and Germany were single digits, sort of like 1.5% growth. Whilst the Netherlands and Sweden were double-digit growth in the first half of 2013. And in his analysis, streaming is not the saving grace yet, but in a market where the CD sales are starting to slow down, it's actually enough, if it's taken off, to tip the industry back into a positive sign or into a growth territory. So that's quite interesting. And also he points out that physical is so huge still. Like if you take out the US and UK market, over 3/4 of the global sales, the global revenues for recorded music are coming from physical products. So of course in the US it's a very, very different story. And Micah, what are your thoughts about where streaming is likely to sit over the next couple of years in the US? And do you think there might be a second wave of abandonment of the CD, or have we found a sort of a plateau now where CD sales are continuing to decline but at a much slowed rate, and hopefully that will help digital catch up?
I think we'll see a second wave of abandonment because it's similar to the conversation we were having earlier about the physical device integration, and I think that one is related to the other. As you have more and more cars coming out with USB plugs and abandoning the CD player in the car, it will begin to dawn on people that, I can just plug my iPod into this, or I can my iPhone or my Android or whatever you have. And as you can do that conveniently and seamlessly, the idea of managing these shiny discs, or even keeping a bunch of digital files and managing them in folders and whatever is just not going to appeal to people. It's not going to be the path of least resistance to consuming the music that you want to have access to immediately.
Yeah,
that's going to take time, but it's probably a next 3 to 5 years sort of thing, and I think that the decline will be steep.
Yeah.
It's just a consumer sort of thing where the consumer is not tuned into the most advanced situation in technology or what we deal with every day in music tech. That's just not where the mainstream of society is yet, but it's catching up.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one thing that's interesting, here at CD Baby, whenever I'm talking to artists, if there's an artist that's actually, trying to pursue a career, because to be honest, we have artists that are just, throwing up tracks for the heck of it, just recording at home and aren't that serious about making a career out of it. But for those that are actually trying to pursue a career, I think the CD is still very important if you're going to have a true global perspective of the opportunity to sell your music. In a lot of foreign territories, like you're saying, we still ship a lot of CDs, and places like Japan and Germany are still buying a lot of CDs. So it's definitely different depending on where you go. And it's interesting because we've been trying to develop some business down in Brazil, and the artists there still, if it's not on CD, they assume it's pirated. And they're very fearful of digital services because they think anyone can just pirate their music.
Yeah.
And in some of those countries, piracy has been an issue where that has, cut out of their sales. But so it's kind of just interesting where you go. It's not just, as far as like globally, I think there's localized cultures that, are adapting in different ways or have different viewpoints. And it's going to be a while before the whole world's just set on streaming music. So, so I think, it's different in different places. Clearly the adoption rate is huge in the US and will continue to be, like Mike said.
And of course, CD Baby is one of the few services that actually stocks physical CDs as well, and then you ship them out.
And the interesting thing is we had planned on being down like 10% year over year with CD sales, but we've done some deals recently with physical distributors, and our CD sales are up 15%. So I mean, it's pretty incredible. Where we could have easily looked at it as a dead format, dying format, and just kind of done bare maintenance, but we actually found a lot of really big opportunity with some physical distributors that are getting more product in stores and places like selling CDs on Amazon. So it's still got a ways to go.
Yeah,
I suppose your parent company, all disc makers, also is experiencing robust business as well.
Well, for them, they've had they were kind of in sort of a flattening period. It's interesting. From them, they're making more CDs than ever before, but it's also a lot of orders for smaller amounts, so the costs are higher. So, back in the day, every artist would order, without question, order 1,000 CDs. Now, there's more artists that are ordering, but a lot of them are ordering 100 CDs, which costs disc makers a lot more. And so it's just a shift in, what people are doing in that area.
And it's potentially also a result of artists going out there and raising money through Kickstarter or Pledge or Indiegogo, and so having a rough idea of how many copies they need to press beforehand, right? Yeah,
I think some of that, and I think some artists are just thinking more in lines of, I just need enough to sell at my shows. I'm only going to play X amount of shows. Where 5 years ago, 6 years ago, even if you weren't planning on going out on tour a lot, you were still going to get 1,000 CDs pressed. So,
if 5 or 6 years ago, I think you were, even here in the UK, you're still probably going to try and go to your local record shop and get them to stock the CDs if you could, and do all the kind of work, which now I don't think many artists actually bother with, because who's going to go into a CD store and pick out a CD by a band nobody's ever heard of? So it's kind of a shot in the dark out there. Cool. Well, interesting stuff. And moving on to social media type play, but also involving music, there was a very interesting news this week on Twitter. So A few weeks ago, Nathan Hubbard, who is a Ticketmaster CEO, left the company pretty suddenly. There wasn't really much of an explanation as to why he left Ticketmaster. But we've seen him just a few weeks later. He has taken the job of head of commerce at Twitter. So he didn't have to wait long to find a pretty great position. And in an interview with Billboard, he states how exciting the path to commerce is right now for Twitter, and he reiterates his commitment to helping the music industry and facilitate sales of music, ticketing, and merchandising through the social network. So, we all know that Twitter is pretty great to communicate with your fans and to, get more fans, to find an audience, essentially. But Twitter itself, and it's also pretty good to sell stuff. If you have anything to sell and you develop an audience, then, chances are that you can sell a few copies of your CDs or get a few fans to your gig through Twitter. But Twitter itself is not really helping much in that equation. So can the company's commitment to a commerce strategy prove to be a big driver of sales in the music industry in whatever format, whether it's ticketing, merchandising, or music or CDs? Kevin, what are your thoughts?
I'm a huge Twitter user. Took a little break the last month of the summer, just laid low, but I love Twitter.
Detox.
I have a Facebook presence, but I've never really enjoyed using Facebook, but I love using Twitter, and I just haven't seen a solution that's been I don't know, that I think is going to catch on. I could be wrong, but there's a company out there that's actually based here in Portland called Chirpify that has been providing sort of a Twitter commerce solution, and we looked at it, and for me, it just really didn't do much more than just providing a link on Twitter. I know they were creating, validated accounts and stuff, and I think it's just more of a user issue where it's going to be complex to get users en masse to understand how to buy stuff from Twitter. I hope they don't create a Twitter where people are afraid to click on anything thinking they're going to instantly buy something, because that would be my fear. Like, I'm just randomly thumbing through stuff and I accidentally click, oh, I just bought that. Great, But, they might have some tricks up their sleeve that I haven't thought of. Yeah.
Mike, do you feel like Twitter has an untapped potential in that department?
I'm with Kevin on a lot of what he said. I use Twitter, but I use Twitter as almost more like a news service to, find out what's going on when certain things are trending, or, the people that I follow. Every time I get a link that is a pitch for something that I'm not very interested in, I grow more shy about clicking on other people's links, exactly like Kevin was saying. It's annoying that, and I understand that they have to do it. Twitter has to monetize, but it's not. As a Twitter user, it's not where I want to conduct commerce. It's not where I want to be buying things from. I like to learn about things from it, but having that convert immediately into a sale as a Twitter user just doesn't happen for me. And I suppose for a lot of people, I suppose there are others that it does. But for me, I just don't. I don't enjoy that experience of being pitched through Twitter.
Yeah.
I deal with it more on Facebook because you can see the preview and you kind of know what it's about before you click on it. And
yeah, and I think as far as just true commerce, because really what they're wanting is to, I assume, do similar what Chirpify is doing, where there's I'm already have an authorized account. All I do is click on a link and I bought it. I can start downloading immediately. Yeah. To me, part of what people like about shopping is the shopping experience. If I'm just on Twitter and there's just a link and I click and I bought it, it kind of eliminates some of the things that people like to do when they're shopping. They actually look at the product, look at the photos, and read about it, and know if that's what they want to buy. So I don't ever see myself shopping on Twitter like that, because I'm like Mike. I use Twitter as like a news feed. I have all sorts of different types of people I follow for different reasons, and I'm not there looking for products. So
Yeah, I guess like the one thing that maybe they're going to develop more is their Twitter card experience, that they're using with YouTube, and now they introduced it this week with Shazam as well, that they allow people to browse the media within the timeline, so that people don't have to leave all the time. So maybe they're going to start introducing product within that play card type, so you can expand into a product. But yeah,
we'll see. I'm with all these free services. The thing I always get scared of is that I start using it, I like it, then they try to monetize it and they ruin it. Because part of the reason why people liked it is because that factor is not there, you know. So
yeah. And when I saw the next piece, I wasn't quite sure whether to include it in the lineup or not. But I was kind of like interested in hearing your thoughts about it. So we've seen more and more artists complain or even ban mobile phones, for example, from gigs. The latest being the Yeah Yeah Yeahs, and the debate around this is kind of growing. There's artists making different demands of the public when they go to a gig. They might not want a camera. They might not want meat like Morrissey. They might have different things that they require. So there was an interesting tongue-in-cheek piece by Wendy Fornow of The Guardian listing 10 reasons why it's okay to use your mobile at a gig. They're all pretty funny, some, but kind of true as well. So including the fact that there are plenty of other distractions other than the mobile phone, that there are worse ways to watch a show than through a mobile phone screen, that people are compelled to take photos, even if they're rubbish, just to preserve the moment and have that record. So a bunch of different reasons like that. But the central, aside from this particular debate on mobile, what's your take on artists making demands of the public? And is it possible nowadays to eliminate mobile phones or cameras off an event like a concert? It just seems like I don't know if we can go back to that now. That ceiling has been shattered, right?
I think that the same lesson that the industry has had to learn overall applies. The public wants what it wants and wants to consume it in the way that it wants to consume it and wants to experience it and share it. And you should capture that and convert that momentum. You can convert that into something that generates more for the artist.
Yeah.
I just don't think that the artist can, or even it's very smart to try to control that.
My feeling is always you should never, ever, ever get in an argument with your fans. Don't make yourself start looking at all the people coming to your show and wanting to take out their phone and take a picture because they love your music so much, the bad guy. I mean, that's just a bad move. And you're not going to solve, it's a cultural phenomena. You're not going to solve it at your show in front of 200 people or even 10,000 people. You're just not going to do it. So instead of making that a thing that just drives you crazy about the people paying money to come see your show, you just got to learn to deal with it. I mean, I do get the idea that, we live in an era where people would rather look at the screen while U2's standing in front of them and watch U2 through the little screen instead of look at them. But at the same time, as a father with 2 young children, I also get the idea that a lot of time, I just went to Disneyland recently with them, that sometimes you're videoing because, it's sometimes more fun to go home and watch it and relive it later.
Absolutely.
Yeah, or show, what was it? I can't remember if it was Bill Maher, Jon Stewart, or whatever, making fun of the people with their cameras up, saying, "Yeah, I want to watch this, just not right now."
Yeah, I mean, I'm not advocating violence here, but I think there should be an unspoken rule that there should be like a mobbing of anybody that takes out a 9.7-inch iPad and shoves it over everybody's head. Should be like a mob reaction. Take the iPad, smash it on the floor or something.
Yeah. Yes. I don't know. I think that it's something that it's like trying to tell teenagers not to text their friends all day long.
Exactly.
You're just not gonna. It's you as the artist don't want to be the one that's enforcing that because there's no way to come out looking good. So
yeah, exactly. It's like artists that I've heard artists quip sometimes on stage about their record sales to the fans that are there, saying, "Oh, I've only sold X amounts." in this country, but there's like 15,000 of you here. Why haven't you bought my record, essentially?
Yeah.
It's just not a good thing to say.
Especially after they just bought a ticket to your gig.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that they probably paid $50 for.
Exactly. And talking about videoing and videos and social media, we can all tie it all together in a nice segue and talk about the gigantic machine that is Jay-Z's Magna Carta Holy Grail marketing campaign, which is unstoppable. Every week there's something happening. And last week the rapper pulled another first by premiering his new video for Holy Grail with Justin Timberlake on Facebook for 24 hours. And this was actually done on Facebook's proprietary video player. And of course, between Jay-Z and Timberlake, they have 38+ million fans altogether. So that was sure to give the video a big boost on social media. So I didn't find any results on what happened. I don't know if they have been released or what in terms of numbers. But what do you think about Facebook becoming a video hosting platform? It seems like this is slightly in their sights. Mike?
Monetization of video is the next big wave of online advertising. And I think that Facebook wants to and needs to be in that game from their business perspective. And what they're doing is trying to drive the adoption of their site as a video platform. They're associating themselves with Jay-Z and Timberlake and whoever else is a good marketing a good marketing strategy from their perspective. I don't know how successful they're going to be. I mean, they have ginormous competition from the established players like YouTube and whatnot, but then you saw recently AOL acquired Adapt TV with a very large video ad network, and there are a couple of others out there that Facebook is ankle deep into what is already an ocean that would be above their heads. So, more power to them. But they've got a. It's that is much more about Facebook than it is about Jay-Z and Timberlake in this case, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree that I know Facebook has their sights set on video because video, even though YouTube's been around for a while, it's still just exploding like crazy. With people uploading content and people engaging in the service. My thoughts is Facebook's got a lot of cleanup to do before they can actually launch this in a legitimate way because their service has kind of become a mess as far as the user experience, and they're going to have to really figure out how to make it work for them. But I know they want to be there, and I'm sure we'll see more of these exclusive Facebook video launches, but yeah. So
yeah, we'll see what happens with that. And I don't know why they would want to take on the nightmare that is actually figuring out the licenses for the videos that they're going to have to co-host, and then people are going to start using user-generated videos, and they're going to have to start paying like YouTube does, and which is a huge headache.
I'm sure it is, and that's where YouTube has years and years and years of building. Their content ID system and all that stuff that YouTube does not have. Facebook does not have, but they could be working on it in the background, and
perhaps we shall see. And we'll take a short break, and in the second half of the show we'll talk about the VMAs, amongst other things, also Vevo and GEMA and Yahoo's redesign and libraries, of all things. But first of all, we'll take a short break featuring this week's sponsor of Digital Music Trends, media law firm Sheridans. I'm here with Tahir Bashir from Sheridans, and this week we're going to talk about 360 deals. And so what are 360 deals all about, and how do they work today?
So I think we did the first 360-degree deal, or the first one that was really publicized, the Robbie Williams one. They are essentially, a record company now says that there's not enough money in just recorded income revenue, so they would want a share of merchandise income, live income, in some instances publishing income, and in some instances management income as well. So the 360-degree deal is basically income from an artist's career, or 360 all around, whatever they're doing.
Yeah. And so what are the general ranges that artists should expect? Because, of course, I'm sure that the cuts are going to vary a lot depending on the popularity of the artist and where they are in their careers too.
Yeah, I mean, there's no one size fits all, to be honest, and it depends very much, as you say, where the artist is in their career. So if you've got an established artist, we generally try not to do 360 degrees deals at all. But newer artists, they've got to expect, if they're going to major label, as opposed to independent, that there is a expectation that, say, for example, with merchandise, somewhere between 10-15% of merchandise income is going to be set aside for the label. Similarly, with live income, that could be, once again, 20 to even up to 40% of that income. From my perspective, as a lawyer representing artists, the main thing there is, does the label justify that income? What do they do for it?
Sure. And looking at the 360 deal model, it was very hyped maybe like 2 or 3 years ago, especially when the Robbie Williams deal came out. But what has happened since then? And is it still as widely used as people think?
Yeah, I mean, it all comes down to income levels. Income levels have dropped in recorded sales, as we all know. So record companies invest, and they need to justify that investment. So to justify that investment, they need to get shares of other income. So that's the perceived perception. It's becoming common now. As I say, particularly major labels. So it's something that artists have to look at, from day one. As I said, then you'd expect some investment back to reflect that. The types of deals which I hate are those where a label's putting in very minimal investment and expect a share of everything.
Absolutely, that's great. Thank you very much. And so I wanted to talk about the VMAs. This is a follow-up story from last week, actually. We've already covered the VMAs themselves and sort of the ratings and all that happened over there. There was a fabulous rant by Darren Hemmings that I had a few tweets about that was appreciated on Miley Cyrus. We can get down to numbers this week, in particular talking about sales projections for the stars that performed at the event. So interesting. Katy Perry came out on top. She had a 15 to 20% gain over the previous week for the single Roar, which is projected to sell, by the end of the week, close to 500,000 copies. Timberlake's super long medley, which was 12 tracks, including the NSYNC reunion and all that. Most of the tracks saw a lift of 20 to 35%, with Mirrors, which is the single from his latest album, seeing a whopping 60% rise in sales. And Lady Gaga also did pretty well with Applause, which lifted between 20 and 40% of the previous week. Meanwhile, Miley Cyrus, who abandoned her Hannah Montana days for good with a performance that left Will Smith's kids with their mouth open and not really... I'm sure they've seen a lot already, but they were pretty shocked anyway. This gave her a big lift in terms of social media. She gained over 400,000 followers between Facebook and Twitter. It's about half and half, 200 each for each platform. That's from Hypebot reporting this. And but the sales of the track actually only went up by about 5% for We Can't Stop. So that's very interesting because she has such a huge growth in social media, but that wasn't reflected at all in sales of music. So Kevin, what is your take on this? How come that she got such a big lift? And then she got probably the lowest figures of all the other artists as far as sales are concerned.
Well, I think she got a lot of people talking about her, but it wasn't because of her music. So
it wasn't good.
So I mean, to me that makes sense. I would almost have. I probably would have been a little surprised if she saw the biggest boost. I mean, as far as award shows go, artists that seem to get a big boost seem to be artists that have something interesting going on at the same time. Or, I remember when Ricky Martin performed on the Grammys and suddenly he was like selling like crazy and it propelled him into another level of superstardom. Yeah. Just because everyone thought it was such an amazing performance and it just kind of took the song over the top. Where, when you see what Miley Cyrus did, it's just about shock value. And, shock value gets people talking, but it doesn't necessarily make them rush out and buy her music.
Yeah. It makes you hopeful for the fate of humanity anyway, the fact that...
Yeah. I mean, the VMAs should be sending her some extra cash, because it's an event like that every couple of years that keeps that show on the air anyway.
Absolutely.
So.
Yeah, everybody's looking for the next thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, very true. It's people could be following her on social media now to not miss out on the upcoming emotional meltdown.
The train wreck that is coming.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's like, as an artist, gaining an audience, except for something like that, most times anything that's going on in your life that helps gain an audience can be used for good. But I think Mike's right. There, people are just following because they're like, oh, here we go. This is the next Lindsay Lohan. This is gonna fill my Twitter feed and Facebook feed with all sorts of craziness.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is kind of a segue show, because there were a few stories last week that we talked about that actually had follow-ups this week. And we talked about Nine Inch Nails as well last week. But there was a fantastic and beautifully laid out, actually, a long-form interview by David Marchese at spin.com with Trent Reznor that I would recommend listeners to go and check out. It's really nice and a very long interview with him. At one point, Trent Reznor had become the reference point really for direct-to-fan movements, even if he perhaps didn't want to be. And there's a salient point here where he discusses his relationship with Columbia and why he decided to go with them for the new Nine Inch Nails album. And I'm quoting here. He said, I know that what we're doing flies in the face of the Kickstarter Amanda Palmer Start a Revolution thing, which is fine for her, but I'm not super comfortable with the idea of Ziggy Stardust shaking his cup for scraps. I'm not saying offering things for free or pay what you want, pay what you can is wrong. I'm saying my personal feeling is that my album is not a dime, it's not a buck. I made it as well as I could, and it costs $10 or go yourself. And I censor myself just for iTunes in case we get banned or something. So how do you feel about his stance? And it's an interesting position for him to be in, that he went to all that trouble, but he realized that he puts a very specific values to his music, and he wants that value respected. And do you feel like on the artist front, and perhaps Kevin, you can start by talking about what CD Baby's artists' expectations are. We're seeing here a major artist that goes back to a major label, and so that kind of reiterates the importance of labels as a background structure, as something that can really help the artist flourish in their career and concentrate on the music at a time where a lot of people had given labels for that and said, soon everything will be DIY, soon everything will be self-distributed. I don't know, what is your thought what are your thoughts on how your CD Baby artists perceive a relationship with a potential label, and are a lot of them pursuing a deal as well?
Well, if you ask the average artist how many of them would like to be signed, the number is probably higher than most people would realize.
Yeah.
To me, the thing that's funny about Trent Reznor is when he was a big advocate for the whole DIY thing, I kept telling people, this is just temporary. I mean, someone like this is not gonna just go DIY, because I think when it comes down to it, as much as the label can be demonized, or people who are the non-musicians involved in the industry can be demonized, they serve a valuable purpose. You just need to know as an artist what you're getting into, and making sure that the exchange that you're giving them is fair in return for the work they're giving you. That being usually the rights to your music, and that they're actually going to do something with it and not just put it on a shelf and kind of roadblock your career. Yeah, so absolutely. I think they provide a valuable service. And an artist like Trent, you don't see many people that have that big of a catalog that want to manage it themselves. That's a lot of work. I mean, to go DIY on his own, he really has to hire quite a big staff in order to manage all the opportunities for his music. So in the end, it's going to make more sense for someone like that to just either be on a label, because at the end of the day, most artists want to spend their time making music. Even artists like myself, I like the business side of things. If I'm got a project, I don't want to be managing every little single detail of it, because it just becomes a time suck and too difficult.
Yeah, and Mike, what are your thoughts on label services companies? You have, for example, Girly Action in New York, where you are, which has done a lot of great stuff. And I don't know, are they going to feel a gap in between bands that sign to mega labels and the rest of artists? What's their role in the future?
I mean, companies spend as much money marketing and selling their products as they do making them.
Yeah.
And a musician's music is similar to any other company's product. You can do some of this stuff yourself, and the online services, whether it's digital distribution or hosting your music or just all of these services that are available to musicians that used to be the purview of labels, can now be done with a smaller budget and with a smaller team than before, but you still have to know what you're doing, and it still costs money. I think what the labels and some of these intermediary services are doing is helping musicians get to a certain stage on their own before they really need the infrastructure of the larger companies to come in and help them take it to the top level.
Yeah.
And the major labels, what they have that is unique to them is the budgets and the know-how to make an investment in music pay off, to actually execute the monetization of the music on a mass level. So we're in an age now where, on one hand, it's easier than ever to be an artist because you have so many of these services available to you that you can get so much done that you could that if a label didn't come in and do that for you in the past, there was no other way to get it done.
Yeah.
Now there are ways to get it done, but it still costs money and it still requires know-how and effort. And eventually, if you're going to be as big as Nine Inch Nails, I agree with Kevin. You need the infrastructure and the know-how of a real team.
And the people on the ground as well internationally.
Yeah, I think the real question, or the things that I think I try to have artists focus on, especially an artist that's maybe up and coming, has some new things happening for them, is that the point of holding out until you just can't take it anymore. You need some sort of infrastructure in order to take your career to the next level, or even maintain the velocity you're on. Is that the more you wait, the more you sell direct, the more you just use a service like CD Baby, the more leverage you have when it comes to negotiating a deal. So, and it also kind of, I think with artists having a better understanding of, if you've kind of spent that time getting the groundwork going and generating sales, not only are you going to have better leverage, but you're also going to have a better level of expectation. I think in the past, too many artists would be like, I just want to be signed so they can make me a star. And it's a business. It's not how it works. You're going to work just as hard as they are, and you're going to go out there and be selling your music on the road and doing all sorts of things. And so I think, if you got to have a real understanding of what they provide to your career. It's not the gateway to being successful like it used to be, or the only gateway, I should say, where, in the past you couldn't even record an album without having a label front a lot of money.
Yeah.
Now, we see it here at CD Baby all the time, artists making great records at home, building a huge following, and then just really having some good leverage to get a great deal that really does propel their career forward. And if it doesn't, they've positioned themselves in a way to capitalize on that time period that they're with a label, to spin off into a direct relationship with their fans that, they may only have, they may only sell 50,000 copies of the release after a label, but they're making all the money from it, as opposed to 200,000 on the label where they didn't see much. So I think it's, I think artists are understanding that better and where that fits in, and that's why when someone like Trent goes out and says that DIY is the only way, that warning signs to to somebody who's in that position to say that, and or you're not seeing the whole story, at least.
Yeah, sure. And I wanted to cover this story quickly, just because you guys are both on the States, and I don't really know much about the background of it. I'll know more by the end of the week. But yesterday it was announced that Vevo would launch in Germany after signing a deal with the country's collection society GEMA. Of course, GEMA and YouTube, you probably heard as well, have been stuck in a protracted standoff for the past few months, and they can't seem to be able to reach an agreement, which is why the deal with Vevo seems all the more interesting. In Germany, a company called Tape.tv has been the de facto alternative for the last few months to YouTube, since YouTube actually themselves geo-blocked a lot of or most music videos on the platform for fear of breaching GEMA's copyrights, because they don't have a deal and been subsequently liable for damages for that. So Vevo seems to go from strength to strength, and I'm going to be interviewing Eric McKay, who's a VP of international business, I think, in Berlin for the Berlin Music Week conference on Thursday. So I'm gonna ask him how that deal came about, and hopefully know more by then. But yeah, I don't know if you guys have any comments on this, or if you want, I can move on to the next one.
I don't know a lot about the specifics of that one, but I do know that Vevo is getting very aggressive with their network here in the States, and so I don't know about much of the issues with GEMA and YouTube in Germany, but I think it is an interesting development that somebody went around YouTube to sort of build a network.
Yeah.
Well, and keeping in mind that Vevo, as Kevin was saying, has been getting aggressive. They also sort of forced YouTube's hand in getting a significant investment from YouTube. I think YouTube actually owns about 17 or 18% of Vevo now.
Yeah.
So perhaps there is.
I think it's only 7%. I think it's only 7%. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
My mistake. Either way, it's this could be a precursor to a YouTube deal with GEMA as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I guess there's a difference there, because YouTube is trying to get a deal done, which I guess would cover, as it does in other territories, also user-generated videos and all sorts of other stuff, which is not the video itself. And so Vevo has an easier time because they only have official videos from the label, and they don't have to deal with user-generated content and how to license that and how to pay for that and all that. So I guess the equation is a little bit simpler for Vevo than it is for YouTube, but not much. And a couple of quick stories before we finish. First of all, Yahoo relaunched music.yahoo.com and a bunch of other content portals, including sports and movies as well. On the surface, it looks like almost like just a newsreader, a glorified newsreader, with limited sources as well. Especially Rolling Stone, the Associated Press, the Hollywood Reporter. But the company has also announced a deal with the Econest, which is a great music intelligence company. Of course, I'm sure you guys are aware of that. And they're going to implement their dynamic music data feature to update artist bios, surface relevant news items, and improve music discovery within the Yahoo ecosystem. So it's an interesting evolution for the service. Yahoo, of course, still has a huge amount of cloud. Just 2 weeks ago, it was announced that for the first time, the company overtook Google in the share of US traffic in July, with 196 million visitors versus 192 for Google. And so, what do you think of Yahoo and music? Is it an important place to be, especially in the States, where, of course, it's got a much stronger hold than elsewhere? And should artists be doing anything to improve their presence on Yahoo as well? That's an interesting point. Mike?
It's a very complicated situation because if you take this over into where we're all going, which is mobile, you just have Microsoft that just bought Nokia today or yesterday. And you have Google that bought Motorola. You have Samsung developing their own operating system, trying to become independent, more and more independent of Android. And then it kind of leaves Yahoo as the odd man out in terms of being able to control both an operating platform and a mobile device.
Yeah.
I think what Marissa Mayer is doing at Yahoo is incredible, very commendable, and she had a very big row to hoe, but I think she has a big slog ahead of her. It's definitely a worthwhile site to be on for musicians, and it's certainly not to be abandoned or discounted, but it still remains a very tough game for Yahoo.
Yeah, I would agree with what Mike says, that if there's a legitimate music service out there, I think it's worthy of you having your music there because somebody's using that service. And that's why, at CD Baby, we deliver music to so many different services because we think there's value in it. And some of the ones that I kind of looked at and went, never heard of that before, have kind of become very popular in certain regions of the world. Like Deezer has really grown in popularity in certain regions. But Yahoo Music, I don't know anybody here in the States that uses it. But I think that Mike also pointed to another issue, that it's really hard to be a player in the music service business without having a mobile device to attach it to. Yeah. And I think that's what a lot of these companies are realizing, not just for music, but for video, any sort of entertainment. And I think that's where Apple got the upper hand on everybody, is they started creating a device that worked seamlessly with the consumption of the media. And I think everyone else is playing catch up, and unless Yahoo is going to have a device, it's going to be really hard.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty difficult for them. But interesting, and very US-centric as well, because I don't really know many people in the UK that use Yahoo, at least anymore. And I just wanted to finish really briefly, because we're running long, with an interesting piece on local libraries and local music. It was posted by Clyde Smith at Hypebot, and he picked up on a recent NPR coverage about local libraries building streamable and downloadable collections of digital music from local musicians. So it's a very cool project. One, for example, from Iowa City Library, which allows the library card holders to log in to the website of the library and download albums of local musicians for free. Of course, the musicians have to own their own copyrights for this to be possible, or the label has to allow for this to happen. So it's a very interesting approach, because it allows libraries to go around the problems that they have with copyrights. Of course, they can't really lend or make anything publicly available online that is copyrighted, so people would have to go to the library and probably check it out there, like it happens for the Library of Congress, which is of course much bigger than a local library. But Nashville is also now wanting to follow suit and look at options to make Nashville history music available to people, even not just card holders, but people outside of that. So I love this idea that libraries can become a hub for local musicians to be able to showcase their music to a local audience. And do you find that it's something that could have drive within small to medium size communities in the US, where, for example, a library is still a pretty focal place where people go and check out stuff, and it could be a place for people to actually discover bands and fuel the local music community too. Kevin?
I think it's a cool idea. I know here in Portland it would probably go over big, just because we have a thriving music community that's actually getting some worldwide attention. I think if you're in a city that doesn't have that thriving community, it might be a little bit harder for it to get any interest. But I think it's a cool idea. The more places that people can check out music, especially music that's happening around them, I think the better.
Yeah, and Mike, of course, this wouldn't really work in New York because it's too big. But I was just thinking about small cities where maybe people wouldn't really know what's going on, but they'd love to know what's going on.
I don't know. I'd like to see some research about what the future of libraries, public libraries, are in the first place. I think that they're struggling to figure out where they fit in the new world. Just when books are available online, so easily accessible. You can do research online. You can go, I don't know. It's just the more they can do to attract people and engage them and get them involved in their local communities, I think that's commendable.
Yeah.
But I don't see that as something that's going to be a big trend in the future.
Yeah, a massive play anyway. And we come to the end of the show. Guys, I want to thank you so much for coming on. And, anything else you'd like to plug other than what we talked about so far, Mike?
Future Music Forum in Barcelona.
Absolutely.
September 18th and 19th. Musicians ought to come. There's going to be A&R panels where real A&R people are going to be there evaluating music from the artists that show up. A lot of also the crossroads of music and technology. There will be investor panels there talking about what they look for in investments in this space, the opportunities that they see. And Mark Mulligan is the keynote speaker who's giving his presentation of the recent past and the next couple of years and trends in the digital music space.
That's great, and that's futuremusicforum.com. And Kevin, anything from you?
I just say that if you want to sell your music online, check out CD Baby. We'll get your music everywhere that matters, including Yahoo Music, like we were just discussing, and iTunes, all the rest. I mean, and we're really excited about what we're doing as far as helping artists monetize on YouTube. We've got some plans there that I'm really excited about that we can't really talk about yet, but then we're also helping artists collect publishing royalties. So we're kind of a one-stop shop to monetize your music and help you make the most money from your music and get it to all your fans. So
that's great.
Yeah, check it out at members.cdbaby.com is where you go to sign up.
That's great. And then hopefully I'll catch up with Brian Felsen at some point in the next few months to hear what you guys are up to. And great. So as I mentioned, I'm going to be in Berlin for in a few hours actually for Berlin Music Week and the conference Word. So keep an eye on my Twitter feed on @DigiMusicTrends and on the site in the coming days for updates from the event. I'm not quite sure if I'm going to be able to do interviews there, but we shall see. And thanks so much for listening today. I hope you enjoyed the show, and I would love it if you could pass it on to one more person in your network today. Email your feedback on contact@digitalmusictrends.com or leave a review on iTunes. Both are appreciated. Thanks for listening. Have a great week. Until next time. And that's all for this week. I really hope you enjoyed this show. Check out digitalmusictrends.com and sign up to the weekly newsletter.